Eddie Jordan, lovely to see you. I haven't seen you for a long time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, you're in your office there somewhere working hard, right? Tell us all about it, where you are.
Well, I spent most of the lockdown time. Actually, Marie was photographing in southern Africa, and we decided to stay on there because there was far less of the virus in Africa at the time, and still is, as a matter of fact. But so we avoided a lot of what went on in Italy and Spain and the UK, and so it was magic. But it was a very serious lockdown. Everything was bolted down. In fact, only about 3 weeks ago they decided to open up for exercise from 6 in the morning, which was absolutely pitch dark, until 9 o'clock in the day. So they were really strict, and you can see the effects of it. It's been quite a successful encounter. They've had far less deaths than anywhere else when you consider the proximity of how people live there, and particularly in the townships and stuff. So commendable. The government did a fine job.
And right now you're on a boat, correct?
Well, I'm trying to figure out that I don't want to try and lose the whole of the summer. I'm just trying to see if it's possible and where it's possible. So I've come to visit the crew, and that's in Gulf Juan in south of France. France has opened up, so in terms of distances, it was down to 100 meters or 100 kilometers. It's now opened up. So France in itself is open, but some of the borders within Europe are still not open. Italy, of course, is.
Eddie, just going back to South Africa, it's a bit of a Formula One enclave now, I think. There's Adrian Newey has a house down there, is that correct?
Well, it's a sporting enclave. Adrian is right beside us, and every morning I ran great names by the name of Percy Montgomery, obviously one of the greatest number 15s there ever was. Francois Pinard, the captain of the World Championship team. So, Cape Town has always been a great sporting place. I went there to do the Argus, which is a bike ride, very famous bike ride, 160 kilometres. 40,000 people did that ride. I mean, it's quite spectacular. You cannot imagine 40,000 people doing any one thing, and the organisation and the structure and how they actually went about it.
Well, it sounds absolutely gorgeous, but getting down to brass tacks, if you live so near Adrian, and speaking of wildlife, what's the feeling about Red Bull this year then? How good's the car?
Well, he's pretty gung-ho about the car, and believe it or not, if the car is as good as his cycling, he will surprise us all, because when you see Adrian Newey around the paddock, you cannot imagine that he's as good as he is on a bike, particularly pushing up Chapman's Peak and many other places. So he's a very fit guy. Do not be confused by what you say. And, he's studied hard the car, he says. He thinks that the engine Honda is going to be particularly good, and he likes the attitude of Max at the moment. There's a good strong team there with Albon, and they will be there, maybe not initially, but after the first couple of races for sure. He believes that they will be very strong.
When you say maybe not initially, the first two races are indeed Austria, which in theory should be pretty good for that car and that engine, eh?
Well, when we were cycling, they weren't the first races, of course, and he was disappointed, having gone all the way to Australia all ready and gung-ho for the race. It didn't happen. So I think there might be a bit of a change. And, Silverstone hasn't been bad for them either, but at the same time it is Lewis Hamilton's country, so 2 races back-to-back there. It'll be interesting to see after the first 5 races, when you throw Hungary into the mix, as to where things are going to be. But I don't see a big change in where we were last season. I still see the Mercedes being the dominant force. Lewis Hamilton is a class act anyway. Do I see him going on to be the champion again this year? Absolutely. I see no reason why not.
Ferrari?
I think when you make a decision and you don't have what you would have called your star driver with Vettel, and he announcing that he was leaving, for sure that will have my experience on those sort of things. When a driver decides that his heart is not there, is he 100%? He will say he's 100%, and of course he wants to be 100%, and I think the team want to be 100% behind him. But there's always my little doubt. You only have to have 98% of something, and then that 2% causes chaos, and it distorts the team. It sends different wavelengths out there, and I think that it'll be a big season for Leclerc. I the Charles will do an amazing job because he is a class actor. But I think it was a very strange decision. All of this lockdown has had, different ideas playing with the mind as to where they want to go in the long term. Will Vettel come back to Mercedes? I don't know that. Of course, there's a little bit of intrigue. But what happens to Bottas? Because, quite honestly, he's done a really particularly strong job supporting Lewis there. And I think, they'll have to think strong about that before they disrupt the team into what is a very cohesive and a very powerful team.
Best of the rest, possibly Toro Rosso, McLaren, Racing Point. We got some big ones in there. Haas, obviously, Renault.
It's strange, Peter. I'm personally disappointed when, all those years ago, I think smaller teams like Jordan always had a slight chance, and it looks now as if these other smaller teams have no chance, either budget-wise, which hopefully will be addressed in this capping business, but I doubt it somehow, and the different rules and the regulations. I think the front three teams are so far ahead of anything else that I think it'll be very difficult to get a constructive and a regular stronghold that can, first of all, to win races as a small team, you've got to get pole positions, and then you've got to sneak the odd little podium, and then when you get that, it builds confidence, and then suddenly when you get the chance to win, you jump on it. That I don't see happening just at the moment. I pray and I do hope for the sport that will happen, but I can't see it right just this moment.
Eddie, it looks as if you got out at completely the wrong time, because we now are going to have a budget cap of only 120 million. Imagine. That would have been so easy for you.
Peter, I notice you taking great joy and laughter, and I am too. I have to say, Peter, when God created, or whoever created it, I became and was, without any question, the luckiest person on earth, both with health, which is important, with family, which is important, and all sorts of. But in particular, when you talk about business, can you imagine if this virus had struck when Jordan was? I mean, we were on the bones of our backside anyway, and this sort of thing, and paying people, paying suppliers, which is something that I felt very proud about, that I was able to do all of those things. But I don't think I would have done it with a lack of sponsorship, with a lack of TV money, with a lack of things. And I'm not sure whether or not the new group of people would have been able to do what, for example, Bernie Ecclestone did for me, because sure, he was hard, sure, he was tough. He claimed back every penny he ever gave me, and rightly so. He charged me plenty of interest, as you would expect Bernie to do. But he did make it available for me, and some things that never change, and that is, it's one thing needing money, but it's the other thing being given the money and getting the money when you need it, and that's a key aspect. Look, I'm sure Liberty have been very good, and hopefully we need to keep teams like Williams, because it's such an unbelievable history. Peter, I remember when you worked there, and I used to ring you looking for bits and pieces and all sorts of advice. None of us would take any pleasure out of any problems with Williams, because when I was racing and when we saw the likes of the World Championships, I mean, you talk about Damon, you talk about, the Prost era, so many great drivers, of course, Keke, many great people went through that team. And it would be one of the saddest days for me if Williams were not on the grid going forward.
Eddie, when you were, as a matter of interest, when you were winning races with Heinz-Harald, with Damon, what was your total spending in a year at that point?
Well, whatever they say was never true, because I never gave the team as much as I had, because I always held money back, and I was really brutal. You talk about budget caps. I would say probably in my best years I had about 75 million, with the Deutsche Post, with drivers. The drivers always paid me. Then I had the DHL. Then I had, of course, Benson and Hedges. But the Benson and Hedges started to become tighter and tighter because of restrictions on the tobacco. I could never have survived like they're surviving now, to be very honest. Tobacco was a hugely important part to our career, even though, of course, now I'm pretty much an anti-tobacco guy. But, I have to be grateful for the times and the finance that they gave me at the time.